1991 Lincoln Mark VII luxury sport coupe.
50HO with fuel injection. What do you got for me? Let's do this. This is full throttle and it shifts almost at red light, hard shift. And we got some rattling going on and it's gonna shift again. You know, it's a piece of shit, but it's a fast piece of shit.
It's an A&D.
Yeah.
That's how they work.
Yeah.
This is a two-door, anachronistic, overweight, overpriced, overcomplicated luxury car that Ford should have stopped making back in 1981, but it's now 1991. Ford was still making personal luxury cars in 1991? Yeah. Long after the rise of Honda and its VTEC, after Toyota and its wonderful Turbo 3S GTE, right after the B-Series, Ford was still making a car for people living in 1975. This was a car for people in the early 90s who still wanted a two-seater with lots of padding in the seats and no legroom in the back for the back passengers. A long hood that makes it hard to tell where the car ends and hard to park. An engine that could make more power, but it doesn't. A high price tag that jumps in the deep end the moment your front wheels leave the dealer's lot. And state-of-the-art gizmos manufactured by the lowest bidder. This episode of RCR is sponsored by Factor. Oh, what do I want? Sun-dried tomato chicken. Perforate. Factor are fresh, never frozen meals. Ready in 2 minutes. Factor are fresh, never frozen meals delivered to you. And they taste really, really good. They also come with protein shakes. This one is, okay, it has caffeine in it. This is a cold brew latte, right? It's a protein shake with caffeine. But do you think I'm stopping there? No, I'm not. We got that. What if we take a little bit of regular coffee, pour regular coffee into my cold brewed coffee, and I accept all consequences and I take all comers? Come. That's not bad. Honestly, if you run out of creamer, like combine that and that, you come, yeah. One of the hard things about doing these ad reads is like all I want to do is eat the meal because it's that good. They have protein plus options, vegetarian options, keto friendly. I did chef's choice this time. That's where I just said, give me whatever. It's all good. These napkins came out of the wash and now they're going back into the wash. Anyway, we have a coupon code for you. Type in regular 50. That gets you 50% off your first Factor box plus 20% off your next Factor box. Order one, give them a try. They taste fantastic, and they're also the correct amount of food you should be eating. Portion control, man. Thank you so much for Factor for sticking with this silly car show this entire time. I make all sorts of jokes on this show, and Factor's like, yeah, cool. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code REGULAR50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. That's code REGULAR50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders. How do you like my lips syncing? That's pretty good, isn't it? Factor in cold brewed coffee plus regular coffee equals more coffee for coffee. Oh, that's tasty. I'm not acting. I'm not doing a bit. This is really good. Link in the bottom. Factor, fresh, never frozen meals. You won't be disappointed. Trust me. Coaxial premium sound.
Mm-hmm. It's got a little tweeter in the middle of it.
Oh, okay.
It's got the JBL system with the, you know, the fancier amp in the trunk instead of. These three are related, so if you're going somewhere or you set a destination at whatever miles, and you hit this, it'll tell you what time you get there based on the miles.
You don't get to say where you're going. You just have to figure out how far your destination is and tell it.
Yes.
So
this thing came out.
It's just your odometer with extra steps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it'll do the math for you. If you keep going at this exact speed, it will get you. But as soon as you slow down, it'll change the estimate because it can't do average speed or anything. It's just if you go at this speed, you're going right this moment. It's kind of useless. I don't really know why it's there.
Can we pop the trunk?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the button in the center console, isn't it? Oh, you got a code?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, one of the buttons will pop the trunk, the other one will unlock the other door, and it does some other things.
Oh yeah, floor mat, not connected to anything, just sliding around. Air shocks, digital gauges, a trip computer, lots of electric motors. Yeah, power windows and seats were still luxury options in 1991. And no handling. Oh yeah, this baby sloshes around. Stops pretty good. Okay, you get first gear. Come on, take this hill. It's trying to push its exhaust out through those tiny little headers. Whoop, 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 lump. And I don't have control over second gear.
Just right
right into third, going up the hill. And sways and undulates. And the trunk has a fake spare tire hump. That was a thing back, back in like the 20s and 30s, you carried your spare tire, like all cars were Jeeps. They had the spare tire just out in the open on the back. And then luxury, Chrysler Airflow, or whatever. They put the spare tire in the trunk, although the Chrysler Airflow didn't have a trunk. Anyway, so there would have been a hump for the spare tire in the trunk, but then space saver things, they started carrying it underneath. That hump wasn't there anymore, but they still kept the hump on the back of the car. And this car from 1991 was trying to remember 1931. Who bought this? Who wanted a yesteryear luxury, like a personal luxury car in 1991? Well, two people. Number one, widows. And two, over 50 men who couldn't get pussy anymore. Imagine, back in 1991, waking up at age 51, realizing you're still renting. Your back hurts all the time. Women say, "I have a boyfriend," before you can even say hello. Stairs make you tired. Both of your knees click when you walk. The last time your dick got wet was August 14th, 1985, when Bruce Springsteen played Veterans Stadium for his Born in the USA tour. A geeked out woman named Pam Levi's let you stick it in stand-up style in exchange for you lifting her over the barricades so she could sneak backstage and sniff Max Weinberg's drum stool. And now you realize that your only romantic currency was being 6'0". The future looks bleak, Jim. You could go to the gym, Jim, but that's a humbling experience. A 45 plate doesn't get lighter when you tell it embellished, flattering stories about your past. How about instead you buy a cheap luxury car? A Lincoln Mark VII LSC. Your own chariot for driving into the land of make-believe. Mark VII. Brought to you by complaining out loud about heating oil prices. Lincoln Mark VII. The official car of trying to get pussy at a church potluck. Luxury Sport Coupe, the official car of telling customer service you're a busy man, and then afterwards masturbating to the box art of a Suzanne Summers exercise VHS while a salad shooter infomercial plays on an RCA television in the background. When I was in high school in the late 90s, losers drove this. Like terminal losers. That's how quickly, from 1991 to 1998, a car like this fell completely out of favor. It was driven by has-beens, pretenders. Imagine Shane Gillis never chased his dreams and stayed in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Got fat, disgruntled, worked at the Mannheim auctions, never hustled, never traveled, never had anything new to say. Watched all his friends move away. But he was still Shane Gillis. There was still a seed of wit and talent, but no bravery, no risk-taking, no material. He played it safe, stayed local, became the place he was living. Welcome to Mannheim Auctions. You'll be moving cars. Oh, who's that? Oh, that old guy? Oh, that's Shane. He moves cars from the detail shop to the auction. Look, if he says anything gross to you, just let him talk. He's harmless. I mean, yeah, sometimes he has a good joke, but don't give him too much attention. Otherwise, he'll think you're his friend and you'll never get rid of him. Lincoln Mark VII.
The official car of an opener whose mic just got cut. 1991 Lincoln Mark VII. Oh great, my loan shark is here. This is a car of multitudes, because it was simultaneously an attempt to capture BMW and Mercedes clientele at the same time giving white-collar mobster energy. But the thing is, it was only ever nice when it was new. Depreciation poured out of this thing like a shotgun beer. And the end result is you were pretty much stuck with this car because you spent the better part of a fortune keeping it on the road, which matches with the diplomatic motorcade aesthetic of the Mark VII. This is a car for third-world dictators if their country in question is sunk-cost South Jersey. Yet you wouldn't know that when this car debuted in the early 80s. In 1983, the Mark VII was a designer car for people who wanted to be able to own their own Mustang. Because this is a Mustang. This is a Fox body Mustang. It's about 1,000 pounds heavier, but still a Fox body. But maybe you thought a Mustang Fox body was too lowbrow. By the mid-1980s, this was attracting the type of people who looked up to Michael J. Fox's character on Family Ties, even though it didn't make all that much sense unless you were just stubborn about buying a foreign automaker. Because being obsessed with wealth and status while going out of your way to drive a Windsor motor-powered vehicle is diabolical work. So let's talk about the engine, because here we go again. Here it is, the Windsor block. You old... Ugh. This engine debuted in 1963, or was it 62, as a 260. And here it is, 1991, from a car that's just barely posted with, overhead valves. So when this engine came out, of course, it was carbureted. Over the years, some changes, and here we have port fuel injection. But underneath, that is still a Windsor block. You know, you got to worry. There's one of these engines where you do have to worry when it stops leaking oil, because that means you're out of oil. Windsor blocks, they don't keep oil in them. None of them do. I will concede, I'm a Ford guy, but the Chevy small block is better. It's plain old. It's tighter. So here in 91, this is a 5.0. It makes 225 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. It could make a whole lot more, but these headers, like when people say, oh, I need more headers, you know, this is what they're talking about, because Ford just gave you crap. Like, these are wholly restrictive. You get a bigger throttle body, headers on this, you probably picked up 30 horsepower. Yes, the Windsor blocks flow better than the old FE blocks, like the one that's in Crazy Taxi, but they're still not great. You gotta work to make these things sing. Anyway, here's your 4-speed Ford AOD overdrive. Do you control third gear? No, you don't. You get 1, 2, and 4, and on something you can lock out 4 if you want. It gets the exact same mileage as my Falcon did when it had a Windsor block in it, just shy of 20 miles a gallon. EPA said it was supposed to get 15 city, 22 highway, 18 combined. Thane told us the previous owner was really meticulous. The previous owner really liked this car. Bought it new, had a big stack of receipts for Thane saying, look, I did all the work. Wow, he even replaced the air suspension. Which is weird because the last thing to go out was the AC, which was, you'd think would be something like, oh, okay, just fix the AC. It's not like Ford has been making these compressor and systems for like 40 years, and any problems that it have been long documented. But whatever, that was the last straw for him. So Thane got this for $1,300. Wow, 2024, that's a steal, man. So he flies down to Florida, buys it, plans to drive it home, because everything's weird in Florida, couldn't get a temp tag. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to drive it to the DMV, gets pulled over on the way to the DMV. He plays up I don't know the rules here in Florida, I just bought this, whatever. Gets all his paperwork squared away, and now he has a Lincoln Mark VII with 238,000 miles on it. This car should be done, but it isn't. It kind of sucks that his front left turn signal got taken out by a rock chip on the way to this film shoot. It's okay. Thane's a Ford guy. He has other ones. You can always get replacements for these. I mean, had it been a headlight, he would have been screwed because for Thane's experience, you can get, reman stuff for the Fox body Mustang, but getting stuff for the Lincoln Mark VII, little difficult. So anyway, this suspension, Ford called it electronic air suspension, whatever electronic meant. It was developed alongside Goodyear to handle automatic load leveling. And the goal here was to create a luxury car that could provide domestically manufactured alternatives to European luxury performance. American cars are always trying to do this, and they sometimes sort of get there. And while that may have been achievable and passable in 1983, by 1991, it was fooling no one. Cars themselves changed so drastically in the 20 years between 83 and 2003, much less the 8 years between 1983 and 1991. You could argue that progress has stagnated a bit as compared to previous years as people try to figure out what the next evolution behind the vague plan to go fully electric will be. But between the end of the 70s and the 90s, for example, we saw the import boom as smaller, more efficient cars that took off in the wake of the 70s oil crisis. And then we saw Chrysler get bailed out by government and then paying back the loans in record time, thanks to the rise of the K car and the minivans. And let's not forget our man Iacocca. We saw the birth of the SUV. It was, as it would come to be known, the death of American Motor Company, the creation of Lexus, and Japanese automakers getting a stronger foothold in the United States. And sure, you could argue the same progression from the 90s to today. Things getting rid of distributors. Everything's coil on plug. You get better fluid dynamics. Subaru finally figures out how to make multi-layer head gaskets. But when the Lincoln Continental Mark VII debuted, it was one of the first cars in the United States since 1939 to have composite headlights, as well as the first modern car to feature replaceable headlight bulbs, as in no longer sealed beams. You remember that technology connections where we talked about how all headlights were the same? America finally catching up to the rest of the world happened around this car, the Lincoln Mark VII. People like to say the Taurus was the first car with composite headlights. The Mark VII came before. It was Ford who petitioned the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to change the rules. It was also the first American car with a 4-channel anti-lock brakes in 1985, beating the Corvette by just 6 months. It looked like this had everything it needed for long-term success and seemed poised to be a flagship for Lincoln. But 1991 was the second to last year for the Mark VII, and production numbers had already cratered from what the car had been doing just a year earlier. In 1990, this had 22,313 units produced, but 1 year later in 1991, just 8,880. What had been a car for people who have their gardener give their son the birds and the bees speech was fast on its way to becoming a car for people who can only be dragged into the future by leaving claw marks on the past. Lincoln Mark VII, a car for an old man at a diner who approaches a booth full of teenagers unrequested and says, "Let me ask you youngsters a question. How old do you think I am?" And you're staring up at him thinking, who are you and why aren't you going away? Look at this car and tell me it isn't perfect for a dad who listens to yacht rock and eats 3 times a week at the Ruby Tuesday salad bar. I get it that yacht rock is making a comeback now in 2024, but this is for people who liked yacht rock in 1998. There are plenty of cars in the world worth doubling down to save. But while it earns its keep solely by survivorship bias, I'm not sure it would be worth restoring if it hadn't already been so well maintained. Lincoln Mark VII, it's a Mustang with a coke problem, and it's got longer, larger doors that come out like bat wings. It feels like the last desperate gasps of the 80s and the potency of wealthy appearances before grunge and gangster rap birthed a resurgent counterculture. The Mark VII is fine enough for what it is now in 2024, but not for what it was then shortly after production. In the late 90s and early 2000s, there was no room in the market for an overpriced car with the style of an ad executive's drinking room, coupled with the turning radius of a Walmart scooter. The Lincoln Mark VII was a luxury sport coupe in an age where that was no longer novel. And here's the thing. Maybe this style of car could have survived if it had been better. And by that I mean, if it was a Lexus LC400. That is what a personal luxury car could have become, which really just means a grand tourer. And that's what this car does very, very well. Stick it on the highway and it is comfortable. Thane said this was a joy to drive home from Florida. Just cruise and cruise and cruise. But this was a car that aged like an apple on the counter. You better enjoy it as much as you can as soon as you get it. Because even if you got it yesterday, that thing is going to be brown mush tomorrow. Congratulations, Mark VII. You're brown mush. But still, well, I can't let it end on that. The Mark VII is a piece of shit, but it's a fast piece of shit.